Welcome to the Hytro Performance Podcast. We're here in Calpe with Soudal Quick Step Cycling Team. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I'm Manu. I'm a physiotherapist here at Soudal Quick Step Team, and I'm responsible for the injuries, recovery, and strength training. So that's how I work with the team.
Fantastic.
So my name is Tom Steels. I'm a former rider many years ago. And today I'm a sport director coach within the team, yeah.
So I'm going to shoot with a quick question. So why is cycling the hardest sport?
Is it the hardest sport?
Well, we'll have to quantify that. What do you think?
I think mentally and physically, for sure, it's one of the most demanding sports. That's for sure. The fact that it's a team sport, but also like really individual. So the fact that you're there with your own body and bike and just competing also against yourself makes it a really hard sport, I think. Don't know if you agree.
Yeah, as an ex-rider, what do you think?
As an ex-rider, I must say, I think cycling is in many topics one of the hardest sports. I mean, nowadays we can also follow other sports through Netflix, what they have to do, and it's also a lot. But we are a high-risk sport, so we have no protection. Speeds are getting higher. If you take a descent at 100 kilometers an hour and you miss a corner, that can really hurt. Not so much space to move if you go into a bunch sprint.
Yeah.
I always compare it with a traffic jam, but you go not at 5 kilometers an hour, but at 120 kilometers an hour. That's the feeling you have. So you really have no space to move. All your sentences have to be really top shape, or you end up in a crash. All the traffic furniture, and at the end also to make results, you really have to be tactically the strongest. So in many aspects of the sport, cycling is really tough. Also the pressure to do it year in, year out, the combination of results combined with what's coming. Your first year is usually quite easy because you don't know where you end up.
Yeah.
The second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th year, you know what's coming up, and you always have to do the same. I mean, other sports are actually also, if I follow the NBA, it's also a tough sport to perform every time the same. But cycling is on the level of toughness, one of the hardest, I think.
Yes, some really good points, and I think, Manu, we were talking earlier about the different physical qualities and attributes of different types of cyclists. So not every cyclist is the same, So can you talk us through the different types of cyclists and the physical qualities, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest difference is in climbers and sprinters, for example.
Yeah.
They are almost different athletes, and they also have to have different training principles. So that's also why it's not so easy. It's not the cyclist you train, but you have to look at which qualities he has and what job he has to do. So that's also making it not so easy for the training staff.
Yeah, absolutely different physical qualities to train, right?
Yeah.
So do you think cycling is more of a physical or more of a mental sport if you were kind of to weigh up the physicality and mental side of things?
I think with the physical aspect, in this field there are only a few who are really on top of everybody. 3 or 4 in the world that are really good, really cyclists. Pogacar, Remco, Vingegaard, really, if they are in shape, they can do whatever they want, they will win. Then you have a big bunch of riders where the physically is important, but they make the difference with the mind.
Yeah.
So the mental state is incredibly important in cycling also, because you have to suffer, and to suffer you have to be happy, and that's the thing. You have to love cycling to suffer so much for it. Yeah.
Sometimes I also think, was it in the past as hard mentally as it is now? Because now also riders have their Garmin and see their sleep, and there's a lot of stuff around. I think if you compare it with the past, and now I have the impression that it's more mentally demanding now than in the past.
It's becomes more and more technological sport. I mean, where with every aspect, is it the food, is it the training, is it the tactics, it's all the stuff around.
Sure.
I mean, you have Hytro, you have the food, you have all other stuff, and you have to make a selection. What can make you better?
Yeah.
But you have to be really, it's the thing now in cycling. You have to be sharp to choose what's the best for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you make that selection, you have to stick with it, and then try it out, not for a week, but for a long period. And if it doesn't work, you go on. But you have to reinvent yourself every year.
And make choices.
And make choices.
Yeah, because also you have just a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
That's also already a limitation. I think also the mental capacity also is limited.
Yeah.
So if you have to do your breath training, for example, together with your cycling training, your strength training, your nutrition has to be top. So mentally also, yes, maybe some riders will have more mental capacity to deal with those things than other ones. So to return to your question, mentally or physically, I think both are so important.
It's a big combination, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think as well it feeds into the recovery conversation, right? You can do all the training mentally, physically as you want, but if you're not recovered, you're not going to be able to turn up the next day to ride or train again. So
and there you also have the time limit again, because for example, after or during a stage race, we come to the bus. Sometimes we have a transfer of 2 hours. We arrive at the hotel 7 o'clock in the evening, and then we already start with the recovery on the bus, and they take their nutrition. They can do their blood flow restriction already, but then massage starts. You just have a small amount of time to be recovered as fast as possible. Your sleep has to be good, but then you also have the fact that you eat late. That affects the sleep again. So it's not that easy.
It's hard to fit everything in, right?
Yeah, also logistically, it's a really logistic sport.
Recovery has to be easy.
Okay.
It has to be easy.
Talk about that a bit more.
No. Recovery has to be. I mean, if you take an ice bath, that's also a little bit of suffering. But after a really hot day, it's also nice.
Relieving,
But if you still have to put other clothing on, or to do something different, or completely get into another thing to recover well, it mentally you also cannot do it. So the recovery has to be easy. Like the things we have in the bus, it's easy. You put them on, you push on, and it starts to work. So you have to make it easy, and then it works in the time frame you have. Massage is easy. You lay on the table, and somebody else does the job. To eat, somebody brings you the food. So the recovery has to be optimal to get ready for the next day.
I think because they're training so hard and performing at such a high level for so long as well, several hours, often active recovery is slightly less welcomed than passive. So if it's easy, quick, simple, they can kick back. I imagine they're probably more favourable choices.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also when we talk about, for example, blood flow restriction as a recovery strategy. We just have to look at the most easy way to implement it, and to do it as fast as possible, as easy as possible. Also mentally, it has to be easy also for the riders, that they don't see it as a job again, because they just did their job, and recovery has to follow.
So what's your viewpoint on recovery being more of an art or a science, or a blend between? Where's your positioning on that?
For sure. My opinion is that recovery should be a science and should be scientifically backed up. We're not doing recovery strategies that are not backed up by science. I think that's one of the most important things when we look at recovery. There should be science behind.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's something in my career I've always, driven research-backed practices. However, I have started to move the needle more towards subjectivity. So not necessarily art, but more what does the athlete like to do? What do they prefer to do, and why? Because if your athlete hates an ice bath, they're probably going to suffer more from doing an ice bath. Therefore, allow them to do what they like. So have you different practices for different athletes because they prefer different things?
Yeah, we don't say that they have to do certain recovery strategies. So we have an amount of recovery strategies, and we say, okay, this strategy is backed up by this science, and this strategy is backed up by this science, and then they can choose whatever they want, because like Tom says, it has to be easy, and some riders prefer this and other riders prefer that. If they have to take an ice bath, maybe they don't like it. Okay, then it's not easy and it's not relaxing neither. So yeah, and that's why the rationale behind this is also really important. They have to understand why they do a certain strategy. So yeah, that's also an important thing.
If you have ridden 5 hours in the rain at 2 degrees, then the only strategy in your mind is just a warm bath. And that's the best strategy you can have. But if you're still okay, and then you can use the stuff you used to.
Yeah.
But it's like you say, it's individual also. Some riders still, they really have to see the numbers to believe, and other riders are more flexible to try something out and just feel how it is.
Yeah.
It's always the mixture of the both.
Yeah.
And that's good.
It makes sense. And I guess that leads us nicely on to blood flow restriction for recovery. What is your opinion on BFR for recovery, and do you think it's a game changer for recovery for cyclists?
Yeah, if it will be a game changer, that we will have to see in the future. But I really believe in it. There's also more science behind it. So also the fact that it's not too time consuming is a really important factor why we choose for blood flow restriction as a recovery strategy. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to use it and to see what the effects are in the future.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
I think we've had a lot of success from teams due to the low energy input, because you simply, as you said, you're tired. You've ridden for 5 hours and 2 degrees. You want to sit back. And because of a product like Hytro, I guess, is you can put on the shorts, strap in, and kick back and relax. So hopefully we'll start to get that feedback from the riders soon.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, so some really interesting insights there on recovery, which leads us nicely on to training. So in terms of kind of strength of athletes or musculature, size, efficiencies, what is more important for a cycling athlete?
But for sure, strength and strength training took its part in cycling, and last year's more and more. We're talking more about the strength endurance or endurance strength sport, and where it was more an endurance sport, I think, in the past.
Yeah.
Depends a little bit also on which type of rider you are. If you're a climber or but also with the climbers, it's about the power output, but also about for sure about efficiency. Also the efficiency in pedal stroke.
Yeah, it's a combination of many things. I mean, as a sprinter, of course, you need that last kick to win. That's pure power, but you also need the other 4 hours, just the endurance and the efficiency of the pedal stroke. Yeah. But as a climber, you also need the acceleration to go after the corners, to not always lose time in the bunch when you are position 120 and the bunch is going strong. So you need different levels of strength also, and depending on your qualities, you pick one thing to really also train and build up, because that's your salary in many things. But also for like a climber, to make your life easier, also that power will need that little bit of explosivity, that little bit of extra power is necessary for the corners.
But also strength is about efficiency. It's about using all the muscles, all the vessels in your muscles, or how do you say it? All the
structures,
the fibers in your muscles also. That's also about efficiency. If you do strength training, then you should look at that too. It's not only about power; it's about using your capacity. Yeah.
I think we were discussing earlier. Sorry.
No, because also nowadays a cyclist, I think the last 5 years, maximum 10 years, is becoming more and more an athlete. Before we rode our bikes and that was it, with back pain, with all other pains.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But now a cyclist is really an athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more an athlete than before.
Yeah, we were discussing earlier as well, just about muscle bulk and
Yeah.
how we don't want, for some athletes, to put on too much muscle size because it offsets power to weight ratio
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So it's so interesting that,
Yeah.
you know, I've been with athletes all my life trying to get bigger, you know, in rugby, for example, but
mm-hmm.
here, very fine-tuned.
Yeah.
Very fine-tuned
Yeah,
to
it's
deliver
about
what they need
efficiency
to.
also. To
Yeah.
see, okay, muscle growth is a part of also strength training. But we for sure we have to look at power weight ratios. So that's why we can't have too much muscles neither. Yeah.
The biggest gain at the end as a cyclist within the borders you have is also weight loss.
Okay.
So with if you gain a kilo of muscles, you also have to regain the power to extend it for 5 hours. So it's a thin balance.
Unless it's downhill,
Yeah.
then you go faster.
It's beneficial. Is there like a calculation for power to weight that you operate on? So if you did put on 1 kilo of mass,
Yeah.
do you have an expectation of additional wattage?
Especially uphill, it's incredibly important to to get the highest numbers out. Huh?
Yeah.
But it's incredibly important. It's a very thin line to really be sharp for the Grand Tours. I think that's the lowest they can get between the classics, where you still have some space. But the power is a little bit more important.
So cycling, it seems to be quite sports specific in terms of the training. Are there any kind of training modalities you take from other sports, or any comparison or comparable training methods?
So I'm working with a lot of athletes also of different sports.
Okay.
So I think the cross-fading between the sports is a really important thing. Also how I get into blood flow restriction started actually in rehabilitation. So I first used it in a client who had anterior knee pain. And then for me that was really an eye opener, how I could give exercises to a client who couldn't do any loading of the knee. And then you take that and try to integrate it in a more specific environment like cycling. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I guess when you're training for specific outcomes in cycling, do you ever look at intensity of a session versus the longevity of that athlete? So we actually need to pull back instead of hammering them with load and make sure they last a bit longer, or is it all in high intensity? You know, is there a blend?
No, it's not about always the high intensities. For example, here on training camp, they're still building their base and doing also low intensity training and I think,
It's a combination because cycling is such a combination of many things, of many aspects that an athlete has to be capable of. You have to have your basic condition, or but you also have need that 5 minutes fast riding. You need also, but you start with the basics. That's for true, because the basics survives you, or gives you. That's also in the name, of course. Gives you the basics to last a long time in the season. Because if you build up too fast, you're down too fast also. And athletes, they have to perform, let us say between 3 and 6 weeks, they have to be at their top level, but that doesn't mean the season is over. Then you have a short recovery period and then we restart again. So it's at the end a long season, which starts in January and we end in October.
Total, I think some riders have 80 race days.
80,
yeah. So that's quite a lot if you compare it with some other sports. For example, in athletics, they have less races than in cycling. So that's also really specific and also needs specific training and approach.
So with regards to blood flow restriction or BFR, do you see it as a tool for kind of pushing those upper limits, getting those extra percentages, or do you see it as a foundation builder, something to support building the foundations of training? Or a blend?
Yeah.
Where would you position it?
At this moment, if we look at blood flow restriction as a recovery strategy, which is a small part of using blood flow restriction, then I see it more as the tip of the iceberg, where the the big iceberg is underwater. You have nutrition, which is very, very important. You have sleep, you have your training, and then you have the extra recovery strategies as an addition. And there, at this moment, I see blood flow restriction more in this part of the iceberg. But we will see what the future will bring. I think there's a lot of science going on now about blood flow restriction. We have to see how we deal with it and how we can use it in the future also to improve our performances. Time will tell.
One thing that can be where you also look for as a coach is, because those athletes are so well trained in endurance, that if you want to give them something extra or hard training, sometimes you want to avoid that the cardiovascular system really has to work hard.
Okay.
And to attend something that can be by blood flow restriction, something extra that fools the body a bit, but that you can do, like you say, a harder effort, then it feels for the cardiovascular system, because that's pushed so hard. I mean, you cannot, if you have to go 180 heartbeats, but you're in such condition, you always hit a wall and you don't move anymore. And to find those extra 3, 4, 5%, that sometimes you have to find it in a different way. It can be by motor pacing, can be by training on the track again, but can easily be by adding an extra tool to the training.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really unique benefits of blood flow restriction, whereby you can have a highly trained athlete who struggles to break through plateaus because their body is so physiologically used to the training they've performed. You add something like blood flow restriction in there and the body's stressed all over again, and it's like a novel stimulus, so they get better quicker. So it's something that doesn't challenge the body too much.
It's a strange feeling, because when I got from Famani, and I never tried it, but I tried it, even after a while you cannot take a cup of coffee anymore. So it's a different kind of feeling and training, that's for sure.
It's a nice way of saying actually you're fooling your body. You give like a stress to your body, like a training stimulus is also like stress to your body. And with these different types of stresses we can fool our body to make it better again.
Well, stress adaptation, right? If we can provide a new stress to the body, it will adapt. And this is why there's research on powerlifters doing BFR. You know, they have a 300 kilo bench press. They can't get any better. They do BFR and all of a sudden 305 because it's a new stimulus. If a cyclist, I truly believe that we can start to push boundaries just by adding this new stimulus. And I think it's interesting, you mentioned on the foundations of recovery. I totally agree. Sleep, nutrition, lowering stress, foundations. But then we start to look at the science of BFR for enhancing nutrition, for example. And you start to think, okay, we can actually use it with the lower pillars to enhance the pillars. What your thoughts are on habit stacking or stacking modalities? So things like ice baths and BFR, is that something you've tried?
I think that will be for sure things we will try to combine and see what the effects are. Using the blood flow restriction during the ice bath, for example, and see what the effects are really interesting things to look for this season.
I think as well, because you're clearly a very innovative coaching staff, you're going to find new ways to use Hytro BFR. We're excited to hear what you've got up your sleeve in the coming months. And a final question, really. What's something that amateur cyclists often get wrong?
Training too hard?
The comparison between the professionals and them. They just have to...
Forgetting the base?
Forgetting the base, knowing why they are an amateur. I mean, these are gifted athletes with the gift to do something and to get better every time over and over again. But as an amateur, sometimes you just have to look at your health, listen to your body, and enjoy it more than because if they often see what the professional athletes, they train a lot, but often amateurs train even more.
Really?
But it's not more that makes you better. It's training better that makes you better.
And I think also an amateur sees the tip of the iceberg, like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
and they forget there's stuff beneath the water. So yeah,
100%.
start with the stuff beneath the water, and then you can build up.
Couldn't agree more.
It's just a long process, and that it's often forgotten. They start at the age of 15, and 20 years later, they still improve 1% a year. But if you forget, they're already doing the other 20%, which that they gained already before. Yeah, it's just a different. When I was a professional rider, I went with the amateurs in my hometown. I had a heartbeat of 110. The guy beside me had a heart rate of 180, and I didn't understand it. I said, how is this possible? 20 years later is when I stopped, and I do the same. It's the opposite
The
way
way
now.
around.
I'm the amateur. So,
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time today. It's been incredible to be here at the winter camp with you guys, and thank you for the invitation. And thank you also for joining us on the Hytro Performance Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.